It is the Blitz here on 94.1 at San Antonio Sports Star. He is Joe Reinagel. I didn't really expect last week that when we talked with Jane Slater that this week we'd be talking about a season wrap-up. Thought the Cowboys would go in there and win.
You did?
I did. And
Okay.
they did not. Let's talk about it with Jane Slater from the NFL Network. Jane, I know it's off season for us, but before we talk Cowboys, we've got some really important questions to get into real quick. You good with that? Because you're a foodie, aren't you?
Sure.
All right. So earlier in the show, Frank Harris, the quarterback of the UTSA Roadrunners, has a tweet going around that he puts ketchup on steak. And we had Frank on and we talked about it. He's not 7 anymore, but he still eats like he is. Are you a fan of ketchup on steak?
No, but I used to drive my grandfather crazy because every time we would have steak as a kid, I would dump a ranch dip on it. So ranch dressing all over the steak. And he was just appalled every time I would do it. So it's kind of funny. I'm a weirdo when it comes to every time I grill chicken, I have to have yellow mustard. I don't eat brown mustard, but I like to put yellow mustard on the side and dip my grilled chicken in it.
I can live with that. I like that. Now, Jane, I don't know, I enjoy a good chicken fried steak. I don't know when the last time you had a chicken fried steak. Have you had one?
Gosh, it's been a long time for me.
Well, I like to dip my chicken fried steak and do some ketchup with the gravy.
With gravy, ketchup, gravy, and the chicken fried steak, which I think is.
What do you think?
I'd probably go yellow mustard on this one as well. I put yellow mustard on everything. I even do egg whites in the morning, and I'll dip them in yellow mustard.
Well, Jane, you do you because, Jason is trying to, make me feel bad over here. But it's like, hey, that's how I like it. People ought to be able to put on their food what they want, right?
I mean, but you eat like an 8-year-old. I mean, and I'm guessing.
Mentally, I am.
Well, I mean, there's probably some truth there. And Jane's diet is probably far better than both of ours.
I absolutely have no doubt about that. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I've long said I suffer from ADO, which is adult delayed onset.
Well done. Jane Slater from the NFL Network here on the Blitz. You look at this season coming to an end for the Dallas Cowboys, and hard to couch this game that they lost to San Francisco any other way than that Dak Prescott didn't play up to a level enough to lead his team to a win. Defense played, held them to 19 points. Inside that locker room, it even sounded like there was some arrows headed towards Dak Prescott. What was the mood inside the room in San Francisco?
I don't know if that was necessarily my interpretation, at least, of being in the locker room. I don't think any of the guys were necessarily throwing darts. I mean, if you wanted to look at the defensive side of the ball, Trayvon Diggs should have tried to at least, I don't know, tackle George Kittle.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Brett Maher could have tackled him down harder. Kevontae Turpin would have made a bigger effort. I would have made a bigger effort. So that's not helping the narrative that he's afraid to tackle, right? So that's one thing I would say. As for Brett Maher, I will say this after the game, probably one of the biggest pros I've ever interviewed. It's not easy after a loss like that. There are guys in that locker room like Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz wouldn't talk to any of us beat reporters for the last 2 months. Completely unprofessional in his dealings with us, and it was frustrating because we'd want to talk to him after some of his bigger games, and he wasn't having it. But there Brett Maher was after some of his his struggles as of late, talking to us in the locker room, and he was even getting harassed by Deebo Samuel and some of the guys pregame, which I think got in his head a little bit. As for Dak Prescott, yeah, it wasn't a good game. It wasn't. And, heading into this, I think a lot of us looked at the Tampa Bay game and said, there's the Dak that we've come to know and expect. If he plays like this team could go all the way. And he just came out and struggled again. And I don't know what to make of it. I really don't. We knew that the 49ers were a good team, but the way they were limiting Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle and Deebo Samuel, to your point, the defense did their part. But, I just felt Dak, there was, there is you could make the argument he just didn't have any weapons around him. I mean, with the exception of CeeDee Lamb, who came on late in the year, I don't know if any of those receivers were consistent for him. There was a situation where T.Y. Hilton looked like he was wide open and kind of on the sidelines at one point in the game. I just don't know why Dak's not seeing the field as good as he normally was. So I don't know what to make of it. I think at the end of the year, we always want to, have a sacrificial lamb. We want to be able to point fingers and say that's the reason why. But I think there was just all sorts of reasons why this thing wasn't clicking this year.
Jane, you're exactly right. And over the last couple of days, Cowboy fans calling this show of blaming Dak, or Kellen Moore is another one that's getting a lot of the heat. And I just saw a tweet from Newey Scruggs, and it was a tweet responding to Kellen Moore's interview with the Carolina Panthers, and he said, "Good luck, Kellen." I think Cowboy fans and even the media there in Dallas, which you are one of, are hoping that Kellen Moore goes somewhere else. Are you feeling that too?
The frustration with Kellen Moore in years past was that he was throwing the ball too much. In other words, he needed to run the ball more. That's what I was hearing internally in the building. There was a frustration that he was not relying on the passing game more. This year, it's like they sort of started going away from the run game again. When you could have, you had two guys in Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott. Say what you will about Ezekiel Elliott. I think he had like 8 back-to-back games of consecutive touchdowns. Didn't fumble the ball once this year. The offensive line had some of their struggles, but I don't know why they weren't trying to run the ball. The problem was when they would run the ball, they weren't efficiently running it. So that's why they started to move away from it. But you ask anyone in the building, if you run the ball, you wear out the opposing team. You just do. And then the way that they line up defensively to play you is different because they're expecting the run, and then that's when you hit them with the pass. And so I don't know. There were some curious play calls, and I realized that the play call at the end, it was sort of a Hail Mary, right? Like, what do you still have left in your bag? But that one was just, I don't know how to make sense of that play call. And then the way the game came down last year, even when they decided not to punt it, what was it, 4th and 4? I thought that was an interesting call there. So something's gonna have to change because they can't keep it the same. We see this with, look at the Tennessee Titans. They just made a whole bunch of changes. Every year when they're not going to move on from the head coach, they make a change somewhere. It's going to be interesting to see what change they make because I think a lot of us around here are wondering, how's this team going to look if Dan Quinn actually does leave? Defense covered up a lot of warts for this offense this year. And if he leaves, he's likely taken some of his guys with him. So I think that's going to be really interesting too. I just think there's a lot of questions. And I still think, I barely got a chance to breathe yesterday. Sort of this week, I just said, look, I'm done talking Cowboys. You guys, I love you. So of course I'm happy to talk to you guys, but you just kind of get to the point where I'm like, if as a journalist, you're tired of covering this team after yet another frustrating season, I can only imagine how frustrating it is internally for some of these guys.
Well, and you look at that, Jane, and go, well, haven't heard from Jerry or Steven since the season ended. It was very similar last year when Jerry was so angry, yet the changes didn't really happen. If Dan Quinn leaves, obviously we're going to see changes. If Kellen Moore leaves on his own, obviously a new OC coming in. But what if Kellen doesn't get the job in Carolina? Would Jerry make a change on his own?
Great question. I don't know. I will tell you this, though. Post-game, Jerry didn't feel as mad as he normally is. You know what I'm saying? Like, in years past, Jerry's been pretty fired up when I've done some of those post-games. He wasn't as mad as he normally is. So maybe he's playing his cards close to his vest. But I would put the Sean Payton thing to rest. I just don't see the Cowboys moving on and giving up a first-round pick. Now, working theory I have is if Sean decides to go back and do TV, which I tend to think that's a strong possibility, that's another year that you give Mike McCarthy. It's another year you see how he looks if, like, let's say Dan Quinn's not there. Then next year, if they decide to go finally do the Sean Payton thing and put that to bed, they don't have to give up anything for him. He's free and clear. I think Jerry's got to consider some of those things. That's why I just don't think there's going to be a coaching change with Mike. I think that, in Mike's defense, look how far they got this year. I know excuses aren't an excuse, but there were so many injuries this year. And it was a tough division as far as they did and get the team and their mindset the way that it needed to be. It's just some of this, I think, absolutely falls on the players. And I'll tell you this, and again, this is not an excuse. It's the postseason. You get up for these games. 3 trips to the East Coast, and then that short week of 52 hours left heading out to the West Coast. I was fried. I don't play the game, but I was fried. So I can only imagine, and if you look at that team, they just looked tired during that game too. And so I'm not sitting here being an apologist or saying it's an excuse, but I was whooped from that 5-week stretch that we just went through. And I can only imagine there was an element to that too, that we started to see it wear on some of the players. But again, shame on them. They had won that Jacksonville game and won that Washington game. They could have gotten themselves a home game.
Yeah, very true. Very true. All right, Jane, I've got what I'd like to see, and I just want to hear what you think about it. The trend, it seems, going on in the NFL right now are teams almost putting all-star teams together. Tampa Bay did it when they won their Super Bowl. The Rams did it when they won their Super Bowl. The Eagles went out. San Francisco went out and got some free agents as well and some pieces. Do you think Jerry's got an appetite to do that, to maybe even overpay for some players to come in to try and maybe make that one splash and get that Super Bowl?
He just hasn't done it since who was the last one he did it for? Was it Brandon Carr? Was the last, like, I remember when he was like, what, the $50 million corner?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone just like lost their minds over that. He was the last one they did it for. I can't think of another big free agent. Can you?
No. Amari Cooper, maybe.
Well, that was an in-season trade.
True,
I mean,
yeah.
Amari
Cooper, that was a trade. And by the way, that one really helped your team. But there's also no guarantees, right? I mean, look at Von Miller. If they'd gone and paid Von all that money, I mean, Von ended up injured this year. If they'd gone and gotten OBJ, I don't think he would have been ready to play. If he was, the Bills or the Giants would have gone out and gotten him. So yeah, I don't know. I don't see them moving on from Dak. I do think there's a scenario next year where we could see Zeke back. I 1,000% have said all year long, I could see them restructuring his deal in such a way that he stays in Dallas. I don't think he wants to do like what Emmitt Smith did and go somewhere else. I think he'd retire before he'd do that. I truly believe that. I don't think Dalton Schultz is coming back. I think they feel really good about Jake Ferguson and Peyton Hendershot. But they absolutely need help at wide receiver. I am such a fan of Michael Gallup, but Michael Gallup he was slow coming back from that injury. And then obviously T.Y. Hilton won't be here next year. And Jalen Tolbert, 4th round pick, wasn't he? He wasn't even activated at times.
Yeah, third round
pick. Yeah,
bust.
Third round, even worse. So I don't know what they're going to do with some of these guys. The point that I'm making is they've got a lot of things they've got to figure out next season.
They do, and I mean, obviously, it's easy to say go get a DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah.
He's going to be available, and Mel Kiper today in his mock draft has the Cowboys taking Bijan Robinson out of Texas in the first round. I don't think many of us Cowboys / Longhorn fans would be upset with that, but do you take a running back in the first round?
Great question. And then Tony Pollard after his injury, after you just signed Michael Gallup after his injury, would it make more sense to franchise tag Tony?
I think it would, right? I mean, unfortunately for Tony, I'd hate to see that for him because I think he's earned a contract, but the Cowboys have every right to do that. So it wouldn't surprise me if they do.
Well, because I think what we've learned with running back contracts, this was after Todd Gurley, there was all this concern about signing Zeke to that Todd Gurley contract. Remember, I had constantly reported they don't believe that Todd Gurley deserved Todd Gurley money. And so they kind of then went and set the market, which they said they weren't going to do, and they paid Zeke. I don't see any running backs getting paid the way that Todd Gurley and Zeke got paid set. And so I just don't see the running back market being, huge out there. So I could see them getting a young running back. I'll tell you, they love Malik Davis in that building. even though he's young, they think his maturity is off the charts. They think that he is capable of being an every down back. I think they really like what they've got with Tony Pollard and Malik Davis. And then you go out and get another one who I know they like a lot personally. Kid that came from Pitt. So yeah, I mean, we'll see what they're going to do there. But yeah, my other question is, or do they go offensive line?
So many questions.
Terrence Steele's going to come back. Terrence Steele's going to come back. But is Tyron Smith going to be back next year?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah, great question. I mean, the offseason questions, and they've been there for a while. I just don't think many of us thought we would be talking about them this week. And therein lies the $1 million question. Now, Jane, I generally, stay away from dudes' personal lives. You're up there in Dallas. Stories today all over the place that Dak and his girlfriend split up recently. What are you hearing on that?
They broke up a long, long time ago, like before the season.
Why is that
I
just
don't know
coming
why
out
that
now?
story came out today.
Yeah,
that's weird. I didn't see that.
Yeah, no, it's all over the thing today, and it's like, all right, well, I don't know how much that explains it, but so that was a before the season deal.
Yeah, are people trying to say that that's the reason why?
Yeah.
It's the internet, Jane. That's why we ask the questions.
Oh my gosh, no, they broke up. They broke up before training camp. In fact.
Wow. Well, that explains a lot. Dak Prescott, Tom Brady. It affects you.
15 interceptions. Blame her. Kidding. So a non-story.
I'm friends with Natalie, his girlfriend. Full disclosure, but I don't think it was like this acrimonious thing that affected either one of them. I mean, obviously, I think it was sad, but I don't think this was, of the magnitude of Giselle. Unfortunate, though. I thought they were a great couple, so that makes me sad.
Fair enough.
Breakups are tough.
Yes, they are.
Definitely.
But I don't think that had to do with his play. I think the bigger concern was coming back from that injury and then all of the offensive line shifts and not having a wide receiver. I really think are three of the reasons why Dak struggled this year. And I think it had less to do with the personal life stuff. In fact, he had kind of, joked with us at one point in the season that he had all of this extra time to focus on film and whatever, because it was just him. So
yeah,
I would argue he had a little bit more time to focus on the game plan, but I think it had a lot more to do with like personnel and things along those lines. But I love the internet and the way it reaches. I'm so glad I don't wear a star on my helmet, because I even laugh at some of the stories that have come out about me wearing a jacket that looks like a football 2 weeks ago. It's just crazy, some of the stuff that comes out when you're associated with the Dallas Cowboys.
Well, but I mean, you kind of did look like a football or a recline. The memes on that were great, but that's part of it. Good stuff. Appreciate all your help all year long. I'm sure we'll see you in Phoenix at the Super Bowl.
I actually am taking a knee. I'm going to spend some time with Mom. Now that the season's over, we're gonna take a knee, and I'm going to take a little break from everything.
Good for you.
Good for you. Good for you.
Yes, but always love coming on your show, and thank you guys for including me and caring about my thoughts. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And I'm sure we'll talk as we get closer to the draft and everything else. Make sure you're following Jane on Twitter at Slater NFL, and she took her dad to the game in San Francisco. Her mom's battling right now, and so
good for her.
I'll miss her in Phoenix, but she needs to go be with Mom for sure.
Definitely.
So they broke up before the year, huh?
Yeah,
damn internet.
I tell you what,
slow again.
It is.
It is the Blitz here on 94.1 San Antonio Sports Star.